There's a place where the night seems to stretch longer than it should. A place where street lights flicker just a little too often and where shadows move even when the wind is still. A town where doors are locked long before sunset, and where unanswered questions drift like ghosts through the empty streets. Tonight, we will travel there. This is the story of a disappearance, one that left behind only fragments of an answer, pieces of a puzzle that never quite fit together. At first glance, it was just another missing persons case. Someone who wandered off, got lost, or simply chose to leave without a trace. But those who looked closely, who listened to the whispers that still linger in that town, knew better. Because this wasn't just a case of someone vanishing into thin air. It was something else entirely. The rain is falling tonight, just as it did on the night it happened. The kind of rain that drowns out footsteps, that muffles screams. It seeps into the earth, washing away tracks, washing away time, until all that's left are the questions. And the silence that follows. You might be listening to this in the comfort of your home, wrapped in blankets, safe from whatever lies beyond the walls. But as you listen, as the rain continues to fall, consider this: somewhere, right now, someone else is disappearing. Without warning. Without reason. And maybe, just maybe, it's already begun. Tonight's story is not for the faint of heart. As the rain falls, let yourself sink into the darkness of this true and disturbing case. There are places in this world that seem untouched by time. Places where life moves at its own slow, deliberate pace, where the roads remain empty past sunset, where the houses stand in quiet rows, each one carrying the weight of its own forgotten stories. Holloway was one of those towns. Tucked away in the hills, far from the main highways, it was the kind of place where faces rarely changed, where the past clung to the streets like mist in the early mornings. It wasn't a place you stumbled upon. You either belonged there, or you didn't go at all. For most, Holloway was nothing more than a dot on the map, a town with a single grocery store, a diner that closed before dark, and a sheriff's department that hadn't seen real trouble in years. But for those who lived there, it was home. Safe. Predictable. Until the night it wasn't. Until the night she disappeared. Her name was Ellen Hartley. 29 years old. A teacher at the local elementary school. She had lived in Holloway her entire life, growing up in the same house her parents had bought decades before. By all accounts, she was ordinary, polite, responsible, well-liked. The kind of person people trusted without question. But there was something about Ellen. Something no one ever spoke about outright, but that lingered beneath the surface. She had a habit, one that people found odd, but never questioned too much. Every evening, just after sunset, she would take a walk. Not a casual stroll through town, not a quick trip to the store, but a precise, deliberate route that never changed. She would walk the length of Birchwood Road, past the old church, down the sloping hill toward the lake, and then back again. Always alone. Always at the same time. It was strange, yes. But not enough to be concerning. Not enough to make anyone think twice. Until the night she didn't come back. It was a Tuesday. The sky had been overcast all day, the air thick with the weight of an approaching storm. The kind of weather that made people hurry home, lock their doors a little earlier than usual. Ellen left her house at exactly 7:45 p.m., just as she always did. She was seen walking down Birchwood Road, the faint glow of the street lights flickering as she passed beneath them. A few people noticed her, an older couple sitting on their porch, a teenager riding his bike past the church. They all said the same thing. She looked normal. Calm. As if nothing was out of place. But then, she was gone. When Ellen didn't show up for work the next morning, her co-workers assumed she had fallen ill. It wasn't until the school called her parents, who hadn't seen or heard from her since the previous evening, that concern turned to something else. By midday, the sheriff's department was involved. A search was organized. They checked her house, her usual routes, the lake where her walks always ended before she turned back. There was no sign of her. But there was something else. Her phone, found resting on her bedside table. Her wallet, untouched, still sitting by the door. Her car, parked in its usual spot, key still in the dish on the counter. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. Except for Ellen. People vanish every day. Some leave willingly, others do not. But in Holloway, no one ever disappeared. Not like this. The last known sighting of Ellen was from a security camera outside the church. The footage was grainy, the image distorted by the mist rolling in from the lake. But it was clear enough. She was walking alone, her pace steady, her hands in her coat pockets. She reached the end of the road, where the pavement turned to dirt, where the trees grew thicker. And then, she hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough to turn her head, just slightly, as if she had heard something behind her. And then she kept walking. She was never seen again. The town searched for days. Volunteers combed through the woods, dragged the lake, checked every abandoned building within miles. Her face was plastered on telephone poles, in shop windows, on the local news. Nothing. No struggle. No signs of foul play. No clues. It was as if she had simply stepped out of existence. But there was one thing. One detail that no one could explain. A single text message. Never sent. Never finished. Found on her phone, still open, waiting to be completed. 2 words. It's here. Asterisk. No one knows what Ellen meant. No one knows who, or what, she was trying to reach. All they know is that, on that quiet Tuesday night, she walked into the dark. And never walked back out. Disappearances happen. People go missing every day. But not like this. Not in a town where nothing ever changes. Not in a place where everyone knows everyone. And yet, Ellen Hartley had vanished. Weeks passed. The search teams disbanded, the headlines faded, and the town settled back into its quiet, uneasy rhythm. People whispered about her in the aisles of the grocery store, at the diner over lukewarm coffee. Some believed she had run away, that she had simply walked away from her life, leaving behind no explanation. Others weren't so sure. Because something wasn't right. And soon, they would find out just how wrong they had been. It was a local reporter who found it first. A man named Peter Calloway, who had been following Ellen's case since the beginning. He had sifted through her phone records, her emails, her past, searching for anything, any thread that might unravel the mystery. At first, there was nothing. No secret relationships, no debts, no hidden past. But then, buried deep in the archives, he found something. A name. One that had been forgotten for nearly 3 decades. Elizabeth Hartley. 30 years ago, another woman with that same last name had disappeared. Same town. Same circumstances. Same silence that followed. And the resemblance was unmistakable. Elizabeth Hartley had been 29 years old when she vanished. She had lived in the same house. Walked the same road. Disappeared on the same day, at the same time. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the photograph. A grainy, black and white image taken in 1992, days before Elizabeth had gone missing. It showed her standing outside the church on Birchwood Road, looking off into the distance. At first glance, it was unremarkable. Just a woman standing in the cold, her coat wrapped tightly around her. But when Peter looked closer, he saw it. The background. And the figure standing at the edge of the frame. Tall. Unmoving. Just beyond the reach of the streetlights. Its face was blurred, its features indistinct. But it was there. Watching. And then, in the final recorded footage of Ellen Hartley, taken 30 years later, there it was again. Same place. Same distance. Same figure, standing just at the edge of the light. The town had forgotten Elizabeth Hartley. Her disappearance had faded into the background, another unsolved mystery buried beneath the weight of time. But now, it was happening again. And someone, or something, had never left. Peter kept digging. He searched through old newspaper clippings, spoke with former residents, tracked down anyone who might remember Elizabeth. Most didn't want to talk. Some refused outright. But one man did. James O'Connell. He had been the sheriff back then, the one who had led the search for Elizabeth all those years ago. Now retired, old and weary, his memory was not what it once was. But he remembered enough. Elizabeth hadn't been the first. She had been one in a pattern that stretched back far longer than anyone cared to admit. Every 30 years. A woman. Always the same age. Always the same day. They never found the bodies. Never found a trace. Just the missing. Just the silence. And one thing more. Each time, in the nights leading up to their disappearance, they had all said the same thing. They had seen someone. Or thought they had. A figure, just at the edge of the trees. Just beyond the reach of the light. Standing. Watching. And then they were gone. James O'Connell told Peter one last thing before their conversation ended. A warning. Don't look for her. Because he had tried, 30 years ago. And whatever he had found had never really left him. Peter didn't listen. He went back to the last place Ellen had been seen, retraced her final steps. He stood at the end of Birchwood Road, where the pavement turned to dirt, where the trees grew thick and the streetlights didn't reach. And then, he saw it. A single footprint. Pressed deep into the wet earth. And beside it, another. Larger. Not human. Peter left Holloway that night. He never published his findings, never wrote a single word about what he had discovered. And the town? It remained the same. Quiet. Still. As if nothing had ever happened. As if no one had ever disappeared at all. Not a trace. Not a clue. Just a name added to a list stretching back longer than anyone in Holloway cared to admit. The town stopped searching. The headlines faded. Her house was sold, her belongings divided among distant relatives. Time did what it always does, it moved forward, dragging everything with it. And yet, something remained. People in Holloway don't talk about Ellen anymore. They don't talk about Elizabeth, or the others who came before. But they remember. They remember the way the streetlights flicker just a little too often on Birchwood Road. The way the trees at the edge of town seem darker than they should be. They remember the whispers, the ones you hear if you stand too long outside the church at night, if you listen closely enough when the wind dies down. No one walks alone after dark anymore. Not really. Because every now and then, someone still goes missing. A hiker. A passerby. A stranger who didn't know any better than to take a wrong turn. And every time, the pattern is the same. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. Just an empty space where someone should have been. And sometimes there's something left behind. A shoe. A jacket. A phone, still open to an unfinished message. Just like Ellen's. 2 words. It's here. Asterisk. Peter Calloway, the reporter who uncovered the truth, the man who found Elizabeth's name buried in the archives, left Holloway. And for a while, it seemed like he had left it all behind. Until 3 weeks ago. When he stopped responding to emails. When his phone number was disconnected. When his apartment, miles away from Holloway, was found empty. The door was locked. His wallet and keys sat untouched on the counter. His laptop was open, the cursor blinking. On the screen, a document. Just a few words typed before it ended. I think I see it. Asterisk. The case of Ellen Hartley remains unsolved. The case of Peter Calloway remains open. And in Holloway, the rain keeps falling. Some say, if you walk down Birchwood Road at just the right time, if you stand outside the church and wait long enough, you'll feel it. That quiet shift in the air. That moment where everything stops. Some say, if you listen closely, you'll hear footsteps that aren't your own. And if you turn around, you won't be alone. Some stories have endings. Some mysteries are solved, the pieces neatly put together, the questions answered. But not this one. Not here. Because in Holloway, the rain keeps falling. The streetlights keep flickering. And people, good, ordinary people, keep disappearing. They don't run. They don't leave. They just stop being. Ellen Hartley was never found. Peter Calloway never came back. And if you listen closely, if you sit in the quiet of your room, in the dark of the night, when the rain is falling just right, you might hear it too. A sound just at the edge of your hearing. A presence just beyond your vision. You might feel that prickle at the back of your neck, that sensation of being watched. You might tell yourself it's nothing. That it's just the wind. That you're alone. But then again, that's what they all thought. And now, they're gone. So tell me, what do you think really happened to Ellen Hartley? Was she taken? Did she see something she wasn't supposed to? Or was something waiting for her that night, something no one else could understand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you made it this far, you might never sleep the same way again. For more eerie true crime stories, subscribe.